I think it's something that we often need to give ourselves permission to do because it feels self-indulgent or unimportant down our tick list of jobs that we should be doing. And sometimes self-care doesn't have to be at the top of your list. I keep describing it as psychological bandwidth. I can't think of a better term. I'm sure there's a proper one that I should know, but there is very little psychological given in the world at the moment. People are finding things harder. It's harder to motivate yourself to do things. It's harder to take pleasure in things. And ironically, or kind of slightly unfairly, when we're feeling most stretched, that's when the self-care becomes most important. Mm-hmm. So if everything's feeling easy, then, you know, kind of doesn't matter if you have a few late nights or eat unhealthily, for example. But when things are feeling tough, that's when you need to find that balance between, like Precious says, not looking for perfection, not pushing yourself too hard. So having that self-compassion, but also thinking about and acknowledging what are the things that make you feel better. So I mentioned diet and exercise, diet and sleeping there. It's very dull, but I know for me, I need to go to bed at a reasonable time. As much as I love it, I can't live off Deliveroo because it makes me grumpy, and that I need to take some exercise, and they are my kind of basics. And I think that's true for lots of people, not everybody, of course, but what are the basic things that you need to do that allow you to function and cope? That soothe drive that I was talking about. Sorry, I keep doing this with my hands. It's hitting the model. It's drawn in 3 circles. I realize it looks a bit odd. That soothe drive, that tends to be the one that people have the most trouble getting into, because as I said, the threat drive, it gets switched on without any help from us. The drive system, we're more socialized into doing that. It's works off dopamine. It's the kind of experience you get when you screw up a piece of paper and manage to throw it into a waste paper basket, even though you've stood up and picked it up 4 times. It's worth doing it because you get that hit. But those kind of achievement-based things, we're more socialized into doing. Whereas the soothe system, which is the one that can regulate that threat system, we're often not so good at. And self-care is really key in allowing us to tap into that soothe system. Some things that can kind of are generally suggested. So mindfulness is often very helpful. I think it's suggested a lot. I've got to put my hands up. I am horrible at it. I reckon I do a 6-week course every year, and it's just not for me. So don't feel bad if it's not. But any type of kind of breathing exercises, meditation, colouring, anything that's asking you to concentrate within that moment. I would say be realistic about your expectations and what you're asking of yourself. These things take practice. So there's a breathing technique called 4-7-8, which there are lots of videos on YouTube, and it takes about, you're asked to do it for a minute and a half. It's not an instant cure, but it's something that if you practice, lots of the people I work with before they go to bed, it can be very helpful because it kind of helps you down regulate a little bit. And often, even if it's little bits, 2 or 3 minutes of counting your breath. There's also something called 5-finger breathing, which is the only mindfulness technique that I've ever got on with because it's concrete enough that I can manage it. Again, lots of them on YouTube. They're often good places to start. I would say if you hate it, don't keep going. Look for something else. So there's something about being present in the moment that can be helpful. Structure and having a bit of shape to your day can also be very helpful. Precious makes a really good point about not being too perfectionistic or too hard on yourself about it. But especially if one's feeling flat or anxious, actually trying to do anything is really difficult. And if you're not forced to do anything, it's really hard to make yourself do anything. So you end up a bit awash. Personally, I really like tick lists. I find them quite helpful of things that I think, A, I want to do, B, I need to. It gives a sense of achievement, and it also helps me structure, evenings that used to be busy and now empty, and yet I still seem to struggle to do things. So I find that quite helpful. Timetabling things in can be very good. Again, this is me personally, but I think lots of people have found it helpful, putting it in your diary so that you're going to do something. That can be helpful in two ways. First of all, like I said, having a bit of that structure. So it's not just endless time. You've got a bit of shape and a bit of difference to your day. That can really help lift our mood. Also, if you put it in a diary, or if you, for example, book into a Zoom art class on a Wednesday night, as people, if we make a public display, if we tell people we're going to do something, there's then a little bit of social pressure for us to do it. And actually that can be really helpful, because I think the thing with self-care is most people know what helps, but A, giving yourself the permission, and B, actually getting yourself to go for that 20-minute walk, it can be really difficult. So having something in a diary that you've told someone else that you're going to do it, that you've agreed with your husband that you'll do this on Thursday night, those things can help us slip into habits that help. I would say I always encourage people, when you're starting thinking about self-care, what helps you, do it at a point where you feel better. Because like I said, when we're in that threat system, our brain just wants us to get out of it. It's not a good point to be creative or to, problem solve. They're not cognitive functions that are as easily accessed. So when you're feeling at a better point, write a list of things that you think might help or that could help. The other thing that I always suggest, which is, I think, helpful, if you think, well, I could think of 5 things that help, aim for 25, because actually what happens is, if we say, let's think of 5 things that lift my mood or help me feel less anxious generally, we limit ourselves to 5. If you go for 25, you'll end up putting down really small things, but it's, it's eating an elephant. Lots of little things can lead to the bigger change. So not just thinking about, well, I'm going to do a yoga class, also thinking about, I like having my morning cup of tea in the garden. Even, it doesn't matter how small it seems, even if it makes you feel 1% better, that's great, because it just keeps building.
Christian, there's so much in there, and I really hope it feels like there's something achievable for everybody within some of the techniques that you suggested, and that feeling that actually you might want to spend a bit of time thinking about what might work for you, particularly when you're feeling in a better place, that will help you to manage when maybe some of those anxieties do build up, or you hear the latest coronavirus briefing, or you're seeing a whole load of news come in, that they're the times where you can actually use some of those tools that you've thought about beforehand. So I hope that there's tools for everybody there. But also, if there's people listening who feel like there's something that really works well for them, then share it. Please do share it.
I should have mentioned, tap up your friends and family, because often they're much better at pointing out things that you like or that you do, or they can recognize patterns. Other people are often much better at recognizing patterns, and they can point out to you and go, oh yeah, no, I do enjoy this, or I do feel better when I've done X, Y, or Z. So they can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, completely agree. And we do have a Blood Cancer UK online community forum as well, where there's a huge network of people affected by blood cancer who are sharing tips and things that work for them all the time. So if you haven't visited that yet, please do. It's a really good source of support.